The coastal ocean fringing Antarctica is important for two primary reasons. The first is that temperatures in this region adjacent to Antarctica control the rate of basal melting of Antarctic ice shelves, which thereby controls subsequent acceleration of Antarctic ice sheets, and we know that this is one of the key uncertainties in future sea level rise. The second reason is that the Antarctic shelf region here is where dense shelf water is formed, and this water cascades off the continental shelf into the deep ocean and fills up the bottom of the ocean as a water mass known as Antarctic bottom water. In this talk, we're going to tell you about a project where we used a high-resolution ocean model to understand the sensitivity of this Antarctic margin region to changes in the local wind field. But we're also going to tell you about the style of project. This project was an open collaborative project where all communication was done on GitHub, where issues were logged about the trajectory of the project, and where progress was made via fortnightly group hackathons. So, in the spirit of open collaboration, I'm going to introduce the whole team. Firstly, I'm Andy Hogg from ANU.
My name is Limma Hoeneke, and I'm a postdoc at ANU.
Hi folks, my name is Paul Spence. I'm from the University of Tasmania Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies.
Hi, my name is Julia Neme, and I'm a PhD student at the Climate Change Research Centre in the University of New South Wales.
Hi, I'm Adele Morrison. I'm from the Australian National University.
And I'm Matt England from UNSW.
Let's start by looking at the mean wind field in the far Southern Ocean. You see that north of this blue line, the zonal component of the winds is westerly, as it is over most of the Southern Ocean. But as you get closer to Antarctica, that is south of the blue line, the winds flip to easterly. Note that we are interested in the oceanic response to wind changes in the region southward of this thin black line, which shows the edge of the continental shelf. Our experiments aim to take a high-resolution ocean model and increase or decrease the winds near Antarctica by 10%. And we call these experiments wind plus and wind minus, respectively. The model we choose for this study is XSOM 201, a high-resolution model which has been previously shown to do a good job of the temperature salinity characteristics of the Antarctic shelf region, as well as accurately simulating the formation of dense shelf water in the region shown by the surface water mass transformation rates in red here, which feeds Antarctic bottom water all around the globe.
We spin the model up for a few hundred years and then initiate the wind perturbations. We run for 10 more years and then compare with the control simulation. The first thing we notice is that sea level on the shelf initially goes up with stronger winds, as shown in the blue curve here, driven by Ekman transport from the enhanced easterlies. But after that initial jump, the sea level gradually drops over the next 10 years. Conversely, with reduced wind, the sea level on the shelf gradually increases. The second key result is that the rate of formation of dense water on the shelf monotonically increases with stronger winds and decreases with weaker winds. Associated with this enhanced dense shelf water formation is increased salinity on the Antarctic shelf. While offshore, the water at the bottom becomes younger, more ventilated, because of the greater export of dense shelf water from the continental shelf. Conversely, when wind decreases, the shelf becomes fresh, while offshore waters become older.
This result raises the question, why do strong winds in this region act to salinify the Antarctic coastal ocean and hence result in a faster transformation of dense shelf water? We came up with three potential hypotheses. The first one is that dense shelf water actually happens in highly localised regions, coastal polynyas, where strong katabatic winds come down off the continent and clear the sea ice away from near the shore. Our first hypothesis is that maybe all that matters is the strength of wind in these dense shelf water formation regions. I've outlined these regions on the map here in yellow boxes, and what we're going to do is we're going to run an additional simulation where we're going to increase the winds everywhere except in these particular yellow boxes. This bar plot shows the dense shelf water formation rate in each of the four dense shelf water formation regions. What you can see here is that in each of the four areas, the rate of dense water formation goes up in the wind plus case, and it goes down in the wind minus case. But in the wind plus no local case, where wind is enhanced everywhere except in these dense shelf water formation regions, we see pretty much no difference from the wind plus case. This means that while dense shelf water formation does occur in these regions, it's not actually controlled by the local winds in those regions, and our first hypothesis is unviable.
So we move on to our second hypothesis, which is related to Ekman-driven upwelling of water onto the shelf. Under this hypothesis, the wind plus forcing increases the upwelling of salty CDW onto the shelf. This small change in the salt balance enhances formation of dense waters. We initially explored this hypothesis by looking at where the CDW isopycnals outcrop in the control simulation. This is a density transect from the Amundsen Sea, one of the few regions where unmodified CDW accesses the shelf. The isopycnals shown in black contours that contain the warm, salty waters that access the shelf do not outcrop, even in winter. This places some doubt on this Ekman pumping hypothesis.
Our third hypothesis is that the main role of the wind is to transport sea ice northwards, exporting fresh water from the Antarctic margin. Supporting this idea, buoyancy fluxes on the shelf region highlight the dominance of the freshwater component in the annual cycle of buoyancy flux. And we can confirm that these freshwater fluxes are almost entirely due to the imbalance between sea ice melting and formation. Moreover, freshwater fluxes in the wind plus case act to make the water denser than control. And conversely, in the wind minus case, buoyancy is increased, so there is a strong and direct effect of wind stress onto a freshwater component of the buoyancy flux. The reason can be clarified predominantly by looking at the motion of sea ice. In this plot, the wind plus case shows thinner sea ice over the shelf that is matched by a northward advection anomalies, taking fresh water off the shelf. The net result of this sea ice advection is lower sea level and higher salinity on the shelf, resulting in stronger than shelf water formation. And again, the wind minus case shows the converse anomalies.
Okay, so we've come up with these three hypotheses to explain stronger dense shelf water formation under increased winds. The first hypothesis around highly localized effects from katabatic winds driving this dense shelf water formation response is not a viable hypothesis, as we saw earlier on. The second one is around the influence of Ekman pumping that doesn't seem to be a likely hypothesis in driving the effects that we see here. And the third hypothesis, the most viable one at this stage, is around the role of the northward sea ice advection controlling the response of the shelf to the wind variations. And so we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this now to confirm that we can distinguish between these last two hypotheses. And to do this, we're going to run some extra experiments where we actually split the wind perturbation. So the full wind perturbation is going to be split into its meridional and zonal components. So two separate experiments. And when we do this, the wind experiment with zonal winds only, shown here by the dotted blue line, you can see that the Ekman transport acts to increase sea level on the shelf, but there's no change in dense shelf water formation and only a small change in the net sea ice melt. And in contrast, in the wind experiment where we just have meridional winds, so just the winds coming off the continent, that meridional wind case shown here by the dashed line, the freshwater balance acts to solidify the shelf. And as a consequence, the dense shelf water transport is very similar to the full wind case. And then sea level on the shelf falls in response to that. So this result confirms that hypothesis 3, controlled by sea ice, is the dominant mechanism in these experiments.
We can summarise the effect of winds on the Antarctic margin as follows. If we increase the strength of southerly winds, then we export more sea ice from the continental shelf. This results in thinner sea ice and a gradual reduction in the sea surface height on the shelf. By exporting fresh water through the sea ice advection, we're leaving more salt on the shelf. The shelf becomes more saline, giving more dense shelf water formation and a stronger Antarctic bottom water circulation. Conversely, if we enhance the easterly component of the winds, which is along shore, this acts via Ekman transport to pile up more water onto the shelf, which increases sea level, but doesn't create significantly more upwelling. In summary, we found that the response of the Antarctic margin to wind changes is dominated by the extent to which the winds push sea ice around. The biggest effect was when we changed the southerly component of the wind, which controls sea ice advection and therefore the freshwater balance of the shelf. Therefore, any changes in the future strength of southerly winds in this region, we would expect to alter the rate of dense water formation near Antarctica. Thank you.